Hey y'all, it's your girl Toyia T, and today we're gonna unpack a topic that really needs to be discussed. I was planning to have this beautiful Bermudan sunset behind me, but I forgot that they're an hour behind, so it's like pitch black outside. So you get me instead. Before I bring the guests on, I wanted to just do a quick intro of our sponsors. This month's show is sponsored by PBS station CET, which is the station for the arts in Cincinnati at our platinum level. We have our gold sponsor, Spiritual Genius, and they are actually going to give $1 for every shirt, every Exodus 1414 shirt that is sold up into the end of this year. And you can find them at spiritualgeniusbrand.com. And then last but certainly not least is Luxurious Styles, who got me into red. Okay, um the home of the Crochet Queen. And I failed to mention that Spiritual Genius Brand is going to give $1 to the Shanquilla Robinson GoFundMe account for every shirt that is sold up until the end of the year. I think I said part of it, but didn't finish it off. And so make sure you go and support that. With that, we have our Travel Abroad show. I'm going to bring the guests on and we're going to talk about what you need to know before you go. Come on in. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, and we will get right into the conversation. I'm always about ladies first, so we'll start with Whitney. If you could just do a brief introduction, and then we'll go to Melanie and over to Will.
Hi, I'm Whitney Glover. I'm an attorney at Graydon in Cincinnati and also a traveler and a graduate of Howard University Law School. Got to give a shout out to HU.
HBCUs. Okay, glad to have you, Whitney and Melanie.
All right, I'm Melanie, or Traveling Auntie, and I'm a luxury travel advisor, luxury business owner, and yes, I also obviously love to travel, and I love to help people travel. So definitely reach out to me after this if you need some help.
Yes, and you are joining us from Mexico, right?
Yeah, I lived here for a year, and then I moved around a little bit, and I'm like spending a month back here, so it feels like I'm back home a little bit. But Netherlands is like my like where I'm trying to live full term. So,
Okay,
but
all
it's beautiful here, but it's dark here too, just like Bermuda.
right. So we can't even show the beauty of it.
Right.
Well, we're glad to have you. And last
Thank
but
you.
certainly not least, Will, can you do a brief introduction?
Good evening. I'm Will Crewer. I'm a partner and COO at People First. We're a HR services and culture firm, and I'm a world traveler. I've learned so much from traveling. I think, character building, getting your culture, all that stuff. I've learned the most out of traveling than any book or any class. So thanks for having me.
Oh, well, we're glad to have you. We're looking forward to digging into this topic, talking about your personal experiences. Sit back, tell us a little bit about you, and then answer the questions, and hopefully people will learn something along the way. So you're all pretty well traveled. This first question is really around your most interesting place that you've ever gone and why you went there. Because I think sometimes we find ourselves in interesting places that we didn't really intend to be in. So who wants to tackle that question first?
I can go first.
Okay.
Um, so I'm going to say Thailand. It was my first time out of the country, and I actually went with school, like with my university. I went to University of Wisconsin Whitewater, and I think since it was my first time out of the country, everything was just like just everything had me in awe and kind of molded me into this wanderer. Just like Will said, like that is absolutely the best way to learn. So like my first time seeing a country outside of a book or a screen was Thailand. So, but it just was all encompassing. It had everything from, the busyness and like city feel of Bangkok and all the, night bazaars and night markets. And then you go to like Chiang Mai and Shanghai, and there's all this greenery and just beautiful gardens and like just the attention to detail. Like if you walk past a bush, it's not just a bush, it's like formed into this perfect shape of something. And then the fruit, like, so everything was just amazing. The temples, the people were, even with the language barrier, you can just like just feel like just the good aura of people. And interesting, like for all of those reasons for sure, but interesting too because like you just get all kinds of food, like the very vegetarian friendly, but it's definitely one of those places you're walking around and can get like a creature just like barbecued on a stick, like all the crazy food you want to try. Like, so yeah, I think that those are the
Not a
biggest things.
creature.
Just all kinds. I'm like, what is that? Like, what is that? Fruits
And
and
how
all
is it
kinds of things that
expensive?
you've never heard
Was
of.
Thailand expensive?
Oh my gosh, no. So like we actually stayed at like a campus university at like for a portion of it. But we went to Pattaya City, which is like a resort town, and that wasn't very expensive. All the street food is super affordable. I mean, oh my gosh, even like different excursions, or if you want to go get like a Thai massage, like very, very affordable compared to the United States. So I think that's the biggest thing that you realize, like kind of experiencing places outside of the United States, that it is very affordable. So oh my gosh, I think their currency is called baht, and you can do like with the conversions, like you can do so much with, you know,
Like
like you can get
$200.
so much more for your money over there for sure.
Okay. All right. I do have it on my list. I haven't gone to Thailand yet,
Oh, you have to
but
go.
I
You
definitely have
absolutely
it on
have
my
to go.
list of places I'd love to travel to.
Yes, I
Okay.
got you when you go.
Yes, I will call you. Who else? Have you gone to, what would be your most interesting place and why did you end up there?
It's really hard to pick just one. um, but Melanie, what I really liked about Thailand was that how hospitable it was. I think that was like the most hospitable country I've ever been to. I think the people there, like if you're a first time traveler, like you said, that was your first trip ever. I think Thailand is a good choice because they're just like so
For
happy to
sure.
have you. Like everybody wants to take care of you.
Yes.
So I thought that was cool. But I would say if I had to pick one, my favorite place I've ever been was in Jordan, because we went to Petra, which is like an ancient city carved into a mountain. So they call it like the hidden city, because back in the day it was for kind of to protect them. So it was very much like a hidden city that is carved into a mountain. You can look it up and see different pictures, but it's just really interesting to learn about like the way they live their life. The way that they got water was they had carved like a canal into the edge of the mountain, and so that water would kind of trickle all throughout the city. But when we went, we took like a horse ride over top. So most people like walk around on the bottom, and so we took a horse ride over top into the mountains and got to look down on like the treasury and some of the famous structures there, which was a little bit different. And then we were by ourselves, so we weren't like immersed in the crowds, which was really cool. So
Nice.
I really like that, and I picked that because I pick everywhere that I travel is based on like something that I've read about in a book or like seen in a movie or something like that. And so just in general, I've always been really interested in the Middle East from, watching movies like Aladdin or like reading the Bible growing up, things like that. So Jordan's right on the border of Israel. So a lot of culture and a lot of history there.
Yes, I've heard great things about Jordan. Another one that's on my list, but I'm afraid right now because of all the wars in the Middle East, and I'll wait until it calms
It's
down.
not so bad. It's not so bad. Just if you hire a private driver, they'll take you around everywhere. You'll be okay.
That's
It's
the
not
biggest
even that
thing.
expensive. Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't even expensive. I think our private driver for like the whole week was like $300 total. And he drove us everywhere and took us to different places that we didn't even tell him to take us. So
Nice. Okay, Whitney, last but not least.
Well, I'll kind of switch it up a little bit and I'll recount my most memorable experience abroad thus far. I would say up until the time I went to Jamaica, actually, I had never been to a country that predominantly had people that looked like me. So for me, that was a very formative experience because I got there and nobody knew that I was American until I opened my mouth.
Right.
And it was very different from traveling abroad. And, sometimes you get the stares, and some culture staring isn't as, socially unacceptable necessarily as it is here in the States. So it can be off-putting, especially for younger people traveling.
For sure.
You know, and so I really appreciated that, because once I got in that airport, I looked around like, okay, well,
Oh,
I belong here. You know, no one, I'm not standing out or anything. And I think those types of experiences, especially to have as a young person, and we know that as Americans, we're often only as aware of other cultures as we see on TV or in the media, social media, or what have you. So I think it's important to have those experiences and be able to go places where you feel almost at home.
right,
Shout
right.
out to all my Jamaican friends. Once I got there, I was like, okay, I get it. I get it. I feel at home. So
Shout out to the Islanders.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say my most interesting experience was probably to Tokyo. I went to Tokyo by myself after my divorce, and it was supposed to be like this spiritual experience. My divorce wasn't final, it was supposed to be final. Anybody that's gone through a divorce knows how that works. And I got to Tokyo and went into the place where I was going to be staying. And there was another Black girl that was in the lobby. And we both looked at each other and were like, hey, girl. And we literally spent the entire time together. She was from Florida and she was a flight attendant for Frontier. Shout out to Treasure. We called it TNT Take Tokyo because she's Treasure on Toyia. And we had a great time. We went to Tokyo Disney. And of course, we were like the only two Black girls in Tokyo, I swear. But we went all around. We had a really great time. So if you haven't been to Tokyo, I highly recommend it. And I really appreciated the kids. The kids in Tokyo are like nothing else because they don't put a lot of pressure on them, unlike other Asian countries, for the kids to like perform before like fifth grade or something. So they're really free spirited, and you can just see the freeness in these kids. They're so happy, and it just makes you happy just to watch them. So that's my experience. So I'll go on to the second question because I know I do have my own little rituals and kind of like tips and tricks when it comes to going abroad. I know I studied abroad when I was in a college undergrad. I went to England and I lived there for 3 months. And one of the things that I learned throughout that experience was to try to go places where I knew the language, and if I didn't know the language, to get a Wi-Fi hotspot, like a buddy, to where I can use Google Translate. And that's how I ended up traveling around Tokyo because I don't speak any Japanese. And so I think it's really important to have some way to be able to communicate because you can't really expect to go into someone else's country and have them speak English because they may not. So that's my tip or trick. What are some rituals or tips and tricks that you guys use when you're going abroad? Something that you do all the time that just helps you set yourself up for success.
I can go again. So I got a little cheat sheet over here. But you mentioned solo travel. I think regardless of if you solo travel or if you're going in a group, there's the STEP program, the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. And that essentially allows you to share your itinerary with the embassy so that like they know where you are and just like an extra layer of protection. Um, as far as money, I honestly don't do anything very special, but always just make sure you have more than one card. So if you like lose a card, you have another card. And then for me, I try to not have all of my money in one place anymore. And I learned that lesson the hard way. But yeah, like if you're going out, maybe not have it all in your wallet. If you have to carry it all with you, like, and right, maybe depending on where you are, familiarize yourself with, some of the risks in the country that you're visiting. Um, I literally, certain areas that I visit, I literally would have money everywhere. I would put some money in my shoe, like hide it somewhere. sometimes when I book travel for my clients, I will literally recommend that they get like a money belt so that they can hide it under their clothes. So if theft and robbery is prominent where you're going and pickpocketing, like, yes, you know, when you like Europe, for example, when you visit Europe, you're going to want to take photos and videos, but just to be mindful of your surroundings. So just always research ahead of time before you do visit somewhere.
Absolutely.
And to kind of tag on to what Melanie was saying, because I'm an attorney, so of course the research and getting an idea and understanding first where the embassies and the consulates are, going to the State Department website and getting that list ahead of time and having a strategy, because of course we don't anticipate anything bad happening, but we see what happens with things in your luggage that may not be socially acceptable in other countries. You know, I know a lot of times there are people who are willing to, as the youth say, ride a little dirty, but that's going to be, at first it's going to be a bad look even if you're flying domestically. Those are federal charges, y'all. But if you're going somewhere, especially a stricter country, a more conservative country, be aware of what's in your luggage.
Like Brittany Griner's situation.
Absolutely. And having important documents. I think, especially if you're someone who travels with children, I have a teenager that's, you know, usually rolling with me. So having, if you're divorced, have your custody documents, because that could become an issue. We're seeing Indonesia passing a law in the near future about adultery. So unmarried people traveling together, being aware of the risk, and, you know, to echo what Melanie said, to really be aware of your surroundings and understand the implications, because, you know, the upset American act typically won't fly. And I think we've even seen that with the World Cup, and how the journalists have been handled over there. So
yeah. Well, since Whitney and Melanie covered the safety tips, my tips are more around like saving money and being efficient, because the way that I travel is very much a young man's game. I'm all about being efficient and saving money. So I always look at like cost of living indexes for like where I'm traveling and kind of pick where to travel based on that. So like different cities. So for instance, like when I went to Italy, I stayed in Verona, which was extremely inexpensive. You could get a whole meal and, you know, a glass of wine for like $10. And then, you know, I took a train to Rome to visit Rome, and I was only in Rome for one day because Rome is so wildly expensive. So I got to go to Italy and see Venice and Rome and do all that stuff, but do it on a budget and save money. So the other thing that I do is like always look for a cheap direct flight here in the States, rather than having to deal with layovers. So a lot of times I've just driven to Chicago in order to get a direct flight that's like half the cost of having 2 layovers coming out of Cincinnati, you know. So because to me that would be worth it. So those are the things that I kind of look at, is, you know, looking at the cost of living and what cities to go to. And once you're in a country, looking at trains or other methods of, you know, transportation, whatever their Uber or things are there. I know in Germany it's called BlaBlaCar. And so finding ways to get to other countries more efficiently, rather than, you know, maybe flying directly to that country. Because when I went to Croatia, I looked at flights to Croatia from Cincinnati. It was like $1,600. So what I did instead was flew from Chicago to Turkey, direct flight, and stayed in Turkey for a week. That flight was like $400. And then a flight from Turkey to Croatia round trip was $90. So
cheap once
like,
you're in Europe. Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, so trying to cut corners like that. But and when I was so, you know, Whitney, to your point about going to Jamaica because of finding people that look like you and not wanting to stand out, and Toyia being in Japan, when I was in Croatia, my girlfriend at the time was Black, and she was the only one, and people like yelled things at her, and it was like extremely uncomfortable. So that was something that we didn't think about. So for you giving that tip to young travelers, I think that that's a good trip, because we still had a great time, but like, of course, it was uncomfortable at times.
Right.
I'm going to go to Croatia next year. So
I think you'll be okay now. That was like 10 years ago for us, so things
okay,
are always getting a little bit more progressive.
Right.
Right. I think they've come a long way.
Yeah.
A viewer said to make a copy of your passport and ID. I think that's very important, especially
That's a
if
good one.
something were to happen to it. I think that leads us into the third question, which I want to take directly to Will because I know he has an experience. I mean, we've all, seen these international situations, your Brittany Griners, your Shanquilla Robinsons. And I want this next question to talk about some of the bad experiences that you've had abroad, things that have happened that you couldn't have planned for and that you just didn't know it was going to have that turn of events. And I want to start with Will because I know he has an experience to share.
Yeah. So, again, on the topic of going somewhere where you stand out, I went to Colombia by myself. And of course, I'm the only blonde hair, blue eyed guy, and they're very interested in what Americans are doing. So, I've been there before and I like had everything mapped out, kind of knew the terrain. And so I wasn't super worried about it, which I guess maybe was part of my problem. But when I flew into a different airport than I'd flown into before. And I always get the foreign currency when I get there to the country because I have an ATM card that doesn't have transaction fees and doesn't have ATM fees. And there's always ATMs at the airport. So at this particular airport, I guess it was a smaller one and there were no ATMs. So I couldn't find an ATM, couldn't get money out. So I didn't want to get into a cab without any money. So it was 1 p.m., broad daylight. I started walking down the street from the airport to find an ATM. Found one, got money out, put it in my front pocket. I just had a backpack. I never checked luggage when I travel internationally. So I just had a backpack, put my money in my front pocket, start walking to get a cab to go down to the town square. And two guys on a motorbike ride up and cut my backpack off me, grab me. I had my phone in my hand, which you were talking about taking pictures and videos and things. I had my phone sitting in my hand. So they grabbed me, grabbed my phone, and took off. And I'd been there for like 10 minutes at the time. And so I was, this is like a 4-hour story of how I got home because I was completely stranded. I had nothing. So thankfully I had the money in my pocket. So I used that to buy a phone to get in touch with my family through Facebook. And they Western Union me some money. I had to get to the embassy, which was a huge issue because the embassy was a 28-hour bus ride away. And I didn't want to being on a bus in America is difficult. I couldn't even imagine being on a bus in Colombia by myself. So I didn't want to do that, but I knew I couldn't get on a plane without any identification. So I went to the nearest city that had a consulate. The consulate can't make you a emergency passport. Only the embassy can make you an emergency passport. So I get to the consulate and they're like, there's nothing we can do. You have to go file a police report that says that your passport was stolen so that you can get on a plane. And that didn't sound right to me, but so I go to the police station to file the police report, and it's like two 18-year-old kids as police officers, and they basically told me that because I didn't have any identification, that was a crime, and they were going to arrest me unless I gave them $1,000. So then there was a whole issue. That was like a whole day-long ordeal of me trying to get my family to, get me some money. So finally got the police report, got on a plane. I couldn't believe they let me on the plane, got to the embassy. Trying to get into the embassy was a whole nother ordeal. Finally got my emergency passport and got back home. And on the ride home, I sat next to an expat who had been there for 12 years. And he was kind of telling me, we were sharing stories, and he was telling me a lot of the reasons why some of the things happened to me. But he was wildly impressed that I got home in 6 days. It took me 6 days of basically being homeless, having nothing, a lot of character building. He was wildly impressed that it was that short amount of time. To me, that was a lifetime.
I'm sure it felt like eternity.
It's one thing to be homeless in America. It's another thing to be homeless in Colombia.
That's right.
Survival mode to the fullest.
That's right. I remember I flew into Fort Lauderdale to get home. And I remember when I got off the plane and saw the American flag, I started crying. I was like, I'm so happy to be home.
Literally.
Never been so happy to be home. Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you were able to share your experience, and hopefully people learn from the experience on what you have to do if something like that happens. Obviously, we don't plan for things like that to happen, but if something happens, you do need to find the closest embassy. You do need to try to get in touch with people at home. And we've all seen the scams, right? Where people are sending you messages on Facebook. So it's really important that you let people know where you're going, that somebody knows who you are, what your itinerary is, so that way, if they do get those messages, they don't think that they're fraud, right? Your parents don't say, "Oh, Will's not even in Colombia. I'm not sending him $1,000." Like what?
Yeah.
Anybody else have any experience? We have 4 minutes. I want to try to combine it with your experience, and then if you want to give your contact information afterward.
I'll try to go really quick. Will, I think your story was absolutely crazy, and I don't know what I would have done. But so for my story, I went to Johannesburg, South Africa with a few friends. And okay, I'm gonna try to make it quick, but long story short, I believe we were set up and followed from the airport. As soon as we pulled up to our Airbnb, we were robbed at gunpoint and they took everything, all of our luggage, one girl, like passports, phones, everything. So our first day was spent going to the U.S. Embassy and consulate, replacing things, trying to wire money. Some people still had money, like, so it was like crazy. But Will, to your point, I had never been happier. We stayed and we were still able to stay and enjoy our trip because we ended up connecting with a family who was able to help us out and drive us around. But yeah, that like when you get back on US soil, and you're kind of traumatized. You're literally traumatized after that. But that's why I say the STEP program, like Serenity commented, having a copy of your passport and all of that, like maybe sending it to your family and friends so they have a copy. And yes, not being, of course, you're going to stand out as an American. We were in Africa and we stood out as Americans. So don't be too flashy if you're going to a country where, that's not normally how people are dressing on a day-to-day in an airport. And the biggest thing is transportation. Try to land during the daytime and have your transportation pre-planned, overly thought out, because, and preferably if you go to South Africa, get someone who is armed and can protect you, because we ended up going the rest of our trip with someone who did carry a weapon, and we felt safe because we were traumatized. So we were like, yes, please have all the weapons.
Have all the weapons to protect us.
Yes. And actually someone in the group was connected with Travel Nowhere. So when it happened, they actually recommended this driver to us. But yeah, so I think when we were standing there waiting for our Uber, that's when they were kind of like spotting us out, like,
targeting.
It was just very obvious. Yeah. So make sure you do that STEP program so people know I didn't know about that when I went to Johannesburg. And yes, I know we're running out of time, but my handles are Traveling Auntie everywhere. So, and my name is Melanie.
We're so glad to have you. Will, do you want to give your final contact information, and then we'll go to Whitney?
You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn, Will Kruer, Kruer.
And they want to know, did you pay the police?
No.
I had to.
No?
No, Will did. Yeah.
Yeah, who are you asking?
Will, did you pay the police? You know how
they walked me. Yeah, they walked. So like they were going to arrest me. They were going to arrest me unless I paid them. And of course I didn't have any money. So it was like an all-day ordeal of me trying to get the money and them walking me like to the Western Union.
So you did pay them? I
had to. Yeah, I was there. Like they were police officers. Like when I said they were 18, like I just mean like that's like the culture there. Yeah, like so yeah, it was I was terrified for sure.
Right. Mm-hmm. Like, we'll pay whatever you want.
Right. Just let me live. Yeah.
Choose People First is Will's information. That's and then it's Will Kruer on Facebook and LinkedIn. And then last but certainly not least, Whitney, I want you to give any insight that you want to give in this we're a few minutes over, but.
Oh, well, just always err on the side of caution. Be aware of where you're going. Have an understanding of any restrictions or holidays that you might have to be observant of while you're there, if there are areas where you have to dress a certain way, or if they're just normal things that, you know, to us as Americans, we're used to doing, but you can't do everywhere. Just be aware. I think that's the biggest lesson that we've seen in the news and current events in the last few months. And I am on Instagram, The Witty Attorney, and on LinkedIn and Facebook, Whitney Glover.
Well, we appreciate all of you guys stopping by today. And if you want to get in touch with these folks, check out their contact information and reach out to them, because I know we weren't able to cover everything today, but hopefully you got something that you can take with you. With that, we'd like to thank our sponsors. Thanks again.
Today's episode of The Plug is sponsored by the following companies. At the platinum level, we have CET, a PBS station. CET is your home for the arts in Greater Cincinnati. At the gold level, we have Spiritual Genius. Spiritual Genius is a lifestyle brand created to highlight spiritual experiences and uplift people in the process. Check out their apparel and travel wear at spiritualgeniusbrand.com. And last but certainly not least, at the bronze level, Luxurious Styles, home of the Crochet Queen. You pick the hairstyle and it's achieved. Conveniently located off I-275 in Springdale Town Center, relax during your visit with complimentary wine and enjoy free Wi-Fi. Call 513-599-1705 to book your experience. The Plug thanks all of our sponsors for helping us keep you connected.